Hello, this is the GHF podcast with Swollpool. How y'all doing tonight? Anyway, this is a show that I am excited to start. Honestly, this is because I talk to myself way more than I think most people do. Maybe it's the same amount. I don't really know. But I just want to talk, and I have quite the knowledge in fitness and health. I am pretty close to a master's degree in kinesiology, which is just exercise science. And I would like to share some knowledge and apply it to some media. So, this is basically what this podcast is about. I'm going to go over some health related topics, maybe just discuss some terms and concepts, and then we're going to get in some more fun stuff, like maybe looking at media and how some media doesn't understand health and fitness the way I think it wants to. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get this started. So, first things first, let's start off with an easy topic. In fact, let's start off with two. First, we're going to start off talking about DOMS. So, what is DOMS? Well, DOMS is delayed onset muscle soreness. So, all that means is when you're done working out and you go to bed and you wake up the next day and you're feeling really sore, you're like, oh man, my muscles, they're not feeling great. That is what DOMS is. Now, some people like to think that is caused by lactic acid. In fact, that is a very common myth that's thrown around. Oh, I have so much lactic acid built up. So let's go ahead and smash that myth because that's just not true. When it comes to lactic acid, it is a byproduct of a physiological process. Now, I'm not going to get into all the separate processes to lead into the creation of lactic acid, but just know at around more than 30 seconds of continuous exercise, your body will enter a new phase where it's using glucose as an energy source. And the byproduct of your body using glucose is lactate. Now, it's not lactic acid. And the reason why it's not lactic acid is because lactic acid immediately disassociates in the blood to lactate and hydrogen. The amount of hydrogen in the blood is what changes your pH levels. So lactic acid does not stay in the body, it disassociates. When you hit that certain threshold where you are now producing lactate, two things happen. First thing is your body will buffer it out. So it will take that hydrogen and it will reuse it in another molecule. So it will bind it to another molecule and basically run it through the system again. This keeps your pH at a steady rate. And because it's running at a steady rate, you're not getting bombarded with the negative side effects. Of course, at a certain intensity, you can no longer properly buffer out all the lactate that is being produced, or hydrogen atoms. This means your pH is dropping and you will experience acidosis, just meaning your blood is now acidic. There are a couple effects of this. The first one's pain, right? That general burning sensation in your muscles when you do continuous exercise for a certain amount of time. Next, it will start affecting your muscle functionality. And, a really easy visual of this is if you have a marathon runner and they're running and their form is really great at the beginning, but towards the end, their form's falling apart. It looks like they're partially limping. That is because their pH has now dropped to a certain point. And of course, if it continues to drop, eventually you'll collapse. This is a good thing because it's your body pretty much saying, okay, if you're not going to stop, I'm going to stop for you. And the reason why this is a great thing, actually, is that if your pH drops too low and your blood becomes too acidic, it can kill you. So athletes collapsing is somewhat of a good thing. Not great, Obviously, you don't want them to hurt themselves on the way down, but it's better than their blood becoming so acidic that they might die. So, now that we know that DOMS is not caused by lactate buildup, what is it caused by? Well, when you train hard, your body's going to experience some damage. Specifically your muscles. They will experience little micro tears. Now these tears are good because it tells your body, hey, this was too hard, we need to get stronger, we need to get bigger, we need to, whatever needs to be done to help prevent that next time. And that's essentially how you get bigger and stronger and faster, right? You do a little bit of damage, your body adapts, and you grow, and you repeat the process. What DOMS is that pain, but it comes later. It's not immediate because you have other hormones and chemicals flowing through. So it comes later when everything's calmed down. It's like, ooh man, all my muscles are sore. Now, the cool thing is the more frequently you train, not longer or harder, those don't really affect it, but the more frequently you train, the less you will experience it because your body will know, okay, this is just something that happens, it's fine. And of course, in addition to that, not feeling any DOMS or any soreness days after is not an indicator that you didn't train hard enough. That is another thing people tend to confuse. The lack of soreness is not an indicator of not working hard enough. It basically means nothing. Soreness is an indicator that you worked hard enough, but the absence of it does not mean that you didn't. And of course, if you are so sore that it affects your next workout, let's say you bench and you bench hard enough that you're really sore and you're not benching again for 3 days, and you come back 3 days later and you're sore and it's affecting your performance, you've probably worked a bit too hard and you didn't recover enough. And obviously that can later affect your gains. And in some circles, it is believed that if you work too hard, your muscles won't grow because they're working so hard to repair themselves. So there's not enough resources to grow because all the resources are being used to repair. That is something to be cautious of. So in conclusion, what DOMS is probably caused by is the micro damage from training and not lactic acid. I haven't heard any other potential explanations that are ridiculous. Lactic acid tends to be the big one. Lactic acid does not stay in your body longer than maybe a few milliseconds before it disassociates, and even then, lactate does not stay in your body that long. The reason you may experience the effects of acidosis is because there is so much acidity being built up all at once that your body cannot deal with it. Over time, it will obviously work through all of that, so you're not going to feel the effects of that later. Those are DOMS. It's not lactic acid. It's not lactate. Just DOMS. Okay, so the next topic I want to go into. Next, I want to go into calories in, calories out, and how it affects weight gain or loss. Now, it's important for me to note that I'm not an expert in this. I'm not an expert in anything. I just am knowledgeable about this kind of thing, but even then, nutrition is not my specialty. There are all kinds of factors such as metabolic adaptation, thermic effect of food, etc., etc. And although I am knowledgeable, I'm not the expert in these things. Lane Norton is far more knowledgeable. There's other channels that you should go to, and I definitely want to do an episode over it, but probably not this episode per se. We're just going to go over the very, very basics. So the basics of it is that if you're in a calorie surplus, meaning you're consuming more than you're burning, you will gain weight. If you're in a deficit, you will lose weight. That is the very basics of it. And of course, that isn't everything. There are different things that can affect how much that affects you, but at the core of it, that is how it works. A calorie is a calorie. Now, if you eat 2,000 calories of candy, obviously it will affect you differently than 2,000 calories of of good, nutritious food. So it is worth noting that where all calories are the same, not all sources of calories are the same, as Lane Norton says often. So where do we go? Well, let's talk about gaining weight. Right? If you're going to gain weight, you need to be in a surplus. Now, if you're in too high of a surplus, you might gain more fat than you want to. And that is something that scares a lot of people. I mean, I guess it doesn't, because the obesity rate in America is skyrocketing, but it should scare a lot of people. But it doesn't, and there's nothing that can be done about it at the moment, except for giving people the information to do what they think is best. Now, of course, there is a lot more to it than that. If you were to do a bulk, right, there's two kinds of bulks, really. There is a dirty bulk and a clean bulk. There's not, it's not as complicated as it may sound, where it's like, oh, dirty bulk, what, do you eat a bunch of shit? You kind of just eat a bunch of shit. You eat whatever you want to, and you're just trying to gain weight. Of course, you're going to gain muscle during that because you're going to train hard, but even then, you're probably going to gain more fat than you want to, and you will have to go into a cutting phase, which is just losing that fat and possibly losing some muscle. So a clean bulk is a bit different, right? So instead of 1,000 calories or like 700 calories, which would be a dirty bulk, you would be at about 200 calorie surplus. And of course, you can adjust that. Maybe you need 500 calorie surplus. Maybe you even need a 600 calorie surplus. The main idea here is to go slow and not overdo it. You don't want to gain a bunch of fat. You want to gain muscle. Of course, you might gain some fat, but you mostly want to gain muscle. And of course, the best way to do it is to slowly get into it, right? This is essentially a clean or lean bulk. This is probably the best way to address this. And the reason being, obviously, you don't get fat and you don't have to spend time later cutting that fat. Or if you do gain a little bit of fat, you're not spending time cutting a lot of it. You're spending time cutting a little bit of it. So if that is the case, there's not much else to it as far as calories go. Maybe a 200 to 500 calorie surplus a day, and you're pretty much golden, at least for a while. Of course, you might need to adjust because when you gain more muscle, you need a higher maintenance calorie amount. But that's not for this episode. I want to go over just the basics. So what if you want to lose weight? Well, you do pretty much the opposite. You cut calories. Now, if you cut too many calories, bad things may happen. You might need to go to the hospital at the worst. At not the worst, you might feel lethargic. You're going to be miserable. It's all terrible. So what would you want to do? Well, first you want to find your maintenance calories. Obviously, you want to do that for a bulk as well. There are a lot of ways to find out what your maintenance is, including equations, which I don't know off the top of my head. What I find is pretty much measure your daily calorie intake for a week, and then average that out. So you're going to count it all up, average it out. That's going to be your current maintenance. And you might say, oh, but I'm obese, or I weigh more than I want to. Don't worry, it'll be taken care of. So you're going to take that amount. If it's reasonable, if it's like 4,000 calories, you have different issues, and we'll address that in a second. But if it's like, let's say it's 3,000, you're like, I'm a little bigger than I want to be. What you're going to do, you're going to drop 200 calories. So you'll be at 2,800, and you're going to go with that for about 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, you're going to monitor your weight. You should lose a bit of weight. Make sure you measure the same time of day every time, because your weight does fluctuate throughout the day. If you do it around the same time every time, it'll be more consistent. And of course, your scale might not be accurate to how much you actually weigh, but it is a way to measure. So you're going to do that for 2 weeks. You should see about a 2 to 5 pound drop. If you don't, then you're going to drop another 200 calories. And continue that process until you start seeing a weight loss. Once you start seeing weight loss, I would recommend stopping right around there. And that will be under your maintenance calories. Of course, you can go more aggressive and drop 500 calories at a time, but that might affect you more than you would hope. So keep that in mind. It's better to go slower than fast and aggressive. And then obviously, if you're like really big and you're like eating 4,000 calories a day, I would drop that to 2,000. Yes, it's going to affect you, and yes, you're going to be miserable, but your biggest issue is controlling what you eat at that point. If you do it for a while, you lose weight, you're like, I want to go back to like 2,500. That is a lot more manageable than 4,000. 4,000, you are probably doing some damage to yourself, unless you're like super muscular. Like at that point, there might be some differences. At the end of the day, you should probably talk to a doctor. Probably have better direction than what I'm telling you. This is the bare basics. If you're a little too heavy and you want to cut some weight, the best thing to do is to cut some calories. And of course, working out can increase that deficit more. So if you cut 200 calories and then you work out, is about 200 calories, because working out does not burn as many calories as people would like. It's about a 400 calorie deficit. That's pretty good. And of course, you have all the calories you burn from just moving around and living and all that. So that is something to take into consideration. Of course, you also have to take into consideration bulking, because working out does spend calories. So you might need a bigger surplus than 200, might be 300. You might get up to 500, but you don't want to make a huge jump, because that will obviously affect you negatively. So for this half, I want to talk about some stuff that's a little more fun, apply some of my knowledge to media. And the first thing I want to apply it to is women in media. And I see this complaint often, that one of two things happen. Either one, why are these tiny women beating these huge buff men in fights? And two, why are these women looking like men? Those are the two main complaints I hear. And obviously we need to tackle the first one, then we can tackle the second one. So the first one is, it is an interesting thing, right? You see a movie, you see a girl who looks like she weighs maybe 120 pounds, beat up a guy who looks like, I don't know how much they weigh, obviously, but they look like they weigh like 250 pounds. Is this unrealistic? Well, no, but is it realistic in the way that they're doing it? No. Why? Well, my limited knowledge of fighting. So the first issue you run into is, yes, it is not hard to knock someone out. You don't need to be strong to knock someone out. But you do need to be skilled to get in a position to knock someone out. So that's number one. Number two, why do they need to beat up men like men beat up men? Oftentimes in a lot of movies, the guard type people don't look to be very skilled. They look to be like, yeah, we're big tough men and we can overpower people. Which, let's be honest, is good enough for most situations, but also you have to look at it in another way. They are probably not that skilled. So if you have a female protagonist who is extremely skilled in, say, jujitsu or judo, they could probably take those people on, because judo, at least, I know a little bit more about judo than jujitsu. I know jujitsu is highly sought after, like it is something a lot of people do. But judo is less about strength and more about leverage. And it can be devastating. You don't have to be big to be really strong at judo. Right? I think there's a clip that was on the Joe Rogan show of this judo master, and he was like really old. He looked like he was 90, and he was sparring with this young, really big guy, and he just could not take him down. Like the young guy could not take down this old dude, no matter what he tried. And that's the magic of judo, right? Because judo, you use your bones more than your muscle. So it's more about technique than strength. Obviously, if you're really skilled in judo and you're really strong, that will help. But that is a really good way to bypass someone being stronger than you. Just flat out be more skilled than them. Or know a fighting technique that removes strength from the equation. I think Joker is a really good example. Not that he has like a superior fighting style or anything, but oftentimes when he engages Batman, it's not in a fist fight. It's like, okay, I'm going to challenge your morals, and I'm going to see what you do about it. So it removes Batman's superior physicality completely. And that's something that not a lot of writers think about, I suppose, is that physicality isn't everything. Being clever oftentimes appeals to people more than being physically superior to other people. But recently, we all know there's the feminist movement, and they want women to be equal to men, which they are equal to men, but it's not in a way that we are the same. We are different but equal. There was some study that showed that women are half as strong as men in the upper body and 2/3 as strong as men in the lower body. Right? And your legs can be pretty powerful. So why don't more female protagonists know Taekwondo? Right? That is a very kick-oriented martial arts. You can do a lot of damage with kicks. And yeah, you can knock someone out with a punch, but if you've seen like a UFC fight where they're just constantly kicking their opponent's leg, it takes a toll, and it takes a toll quickly. Kicks are no joke. You don't need to punch everybody. I don't know why everyone needs to punch people. Kick them. It's great. Men have this huge weakness in between their legs. Why don't more female characters take advantage of that? It's right there. Dirty fighting is a way of fighting. I'm not sure why it's looked upon as if it's a bad thing when it's a great thing. I'm not sure why we need 120-pound women beating up like 250-pound men as if that man was fighting another man. It's something that's weird and a lot of people notice it. Of course, we could take a different approach and just have more muscular women, right? I don't mean like super beefy, but like someone who looks like they train. Or have like a training scene before where they're training to fight and they fight this bigger dude. I think Iron Man 2 does a really good job of this because Black Widow, she's obviously smaller than these people, but A, you could tell she's significantly more skilled, and B, she uses weapons, which is another thing. I don't really understand why you need to beat someone with fists. I think in a lot of movies, men will use weapons because weapons are an equalizer. If you're fighting 5 unarmed people and you have a knife, sure, you might not be, like, again, even ground, but the fact that you have a knife gives you a better chance. Having a gun gives you a much higher chance than that because, guess what? I can shoot you. I don't have to be close. So, weapons are great. I don't know why we have this assumption that we can't use weapons. And on that note, small tangent, I think Shadiversity made a small mistake in his, I don't remember what video. It was a video about, I think it was Fantasy Rearmed. He doesn't really do that series anymore, but he said bows aren't a weapon for women, and I'm not strawmanning him, right? He doesn't mean that as in, oh, women can't shoot bows or anything, but the idea usually is, oh, well, women are a little weaker, half as weak as men in the upper body, so let's give them a bow. But the problem is, in medieval times, the bow that you would give to a woman would probably be a hunting bow, not a war bow. Because a war bow, from what I understand from his videos, has a pull weight of about 70 to about 200 pounds, which most really strong men cannot pull. Why? Because most really strong men don't pull bows back. The muscles to do that are not developed. And if they are developed, the neural pathways have not been created. It is a foreign movement to most people. They would need to practice even if they are physically strong enough to do it. A hunting bow probably wouldn't have that high of a pull rate. Mostly pull rate. Pull. I guess draw? It would be draw. Whichever one. I'm not fixing that. Whichever, it wouldn't have that high of a draw, because why do you need it? You don't need to pierce armor, you need to pierce flesh. And if it's a modern bow, it can have a draw weight of pretty much anything as long as it can shoot the arrow. In middle school, I took an archery class, and there was a little girl. She was tiny. She was like 4 or 5 or something. Probably taller than that, but she was really small. That's an exaggeration, obviously. But she was tiny. She was much better at target shooting than I was. Obviously because, there was a bow for her, and she was better at it. I was better at practical shooting. I was the only person in the class who could shoot the balloon that was blowing in the wind consistently. So my target shooting was trash, but I could hit a moving target, which I think I'm a lot more practical in that sense. Regardless of that, yeah, weapons are a great equalizer that you can give to a myriad of characters. Also, powers. Give your small women powers, and that kind of waves away that whole, she's only 120 pounds. How is she beating this huge guy? Now, the other topic I want to discuss is a bit different. It is why so many women in media are turning into masculine figures. Okay, number one, that's not as common as people like to pretend it is, because it's not. I've only seen one major example, and that's Abby. I take that back. There are a lot of examples, but they're mostly in comics, and we all know comics are dying. But the thing that reminded me of this were the people who made Horizon Zero Dawn saying this. I'm not going to read it. You can pause and read it. I'll give you a couple seconds right about now. Okay, hopefully you paused and read it, because I'm not going to read it, because I've heard it 4 times already, and I don't want to read it myself. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't notice a difference when I watched the gameplay. At all. She looked exactly the same to me. But people are saying she looks less attractive. And I have a couple theories about that. And I do have a little bit of, maybe not really evidence, but just thoughts about it. The first reason people say that is obviously because, there's this whole culture and counterculture thing with social justice and not social justice. So everything that is not exactly like, oh, this woman isn't sexy, so it must be progressive. I don't know what that sentiment is. I think it's kind of stupid, and you're looking too far into things that may not be what it is. But at the same time, obviously, there probably is some merit to it. There's probably not. Who really knows? And of course, I will get into that a bit later, because I do have thoughts on some of the depictions of muscular women. But the second one, I think, is that people are a little bit protective of their, let's say, waifus. And I think everyone's a bit like this. People want to see attractive people in media. And I had a thought about this earlier, where when you read a book and a character is described, I don't believe anyone imagines that character as being the worst version of the description. You just don't. You usually imagine people as attractive. Whatever the description is, you imagine them in the most attractive version of that possible. Unless they say they're really fucking ugly, then you might still imagine them as the most attractive ugly person ever, or you might think of them as super ugly. I don't really know. I'm sure there's some psychological study of that. But regardless, I think most people like to imagine their characters in media as attractive. Doesn't really matter if you're straight or gay or whatever else in between. When you read something, you're going to imagine that person as attractive in most circumstances. So if you're a guy and you're reading about this dude, he's probably not going to be ugly in your head. He's probably going to be some sort of hotshot in some way, form, or fashion. And I don't think there's anything to be ashamed about. It's just how it is. And people are protective of that. So when they see a character and they're like, that's not who I imagined, some of them will be upset. We all remember the Mortal Kombat 11 thing. If you play video games, you might not be into it. That's fine. But if you are, we all remember the Mortal Kombat 11 thing when a bunch of people were upset because, oh, all the women, they shrunk their breasts and their butts and all this stuff, but all the men, they have their muscles out, they're shirtless, sometimes they are just wearing a loincloth. And that was a whole fiasco, and people got over it. I don't think it's a very good game, but regardless, people got over it, moved on. But that is something that does happen, and it's partially because of culture and how things are going right now, and it's partially because people want to play or watch or read attractive characters. Now with the Aloy, whatever her name is. Now with the Alloy thing, I think it's Alloy, or is it Aloy? I don't really know. I never played the first one. I just know Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Zero Dawn Forbidden West. I am aware of those games. And so people are saying she looks more masculine than ever. Well, no she doesn't. She just kind of looks like she has a fat face, which we all know people like that. We all know people with kind of tubby faces, although they're not fat. Just how it is. In addition to knowing people with fat faces, we also know people who are a bit muscular. Women, contrary to some people on the internet's belief, women can be muscular. Watch the CrossFit Games. Watch the Olympics. But people who think femininity is weakness because for some reason a lot of writers, especially in comics, think being feminine is a bad thing. Look at Olympic lifters. Look at CrossFit. Don't do CrossFit, by the way. I think CrossFit's horrible. I think they have good ideas, but their exercise selection bothers me. But look at those athletes. Look at power lifters. Look, I wouldn't say bikini or like female bodybuilding because they're more aesthetic than strength. So forget them. Look at strong women, right? Look at female athletes like Olympic track, gymnasts, all these things. A lot of them are still feminine, but they're muscular. Because guess what? Being muscular is not a masculine or feminine thing. Some women look a little more masculine than others. Some men look a little more feminine than others. This is something that we all appreciate. Well, I don't know about appreciate. We all have seen, and it is our reality. In regards to it being our reality, we also have to accept that you can be muscular and feminine. There's a long list of women that achieve both. Like, here's the thing. There's a reason why a lot of like really muscular women or female bodybuilding contestants get fake boobs. Women like feeling like women despite their hobbies. Not because of their hobbies, despite their hobbies. And very few women have the genetics to keep their boobs and be muscular. Why? You might be wondering. Because there is no such thing as spot reduction of fat. You lose fat wherever your body decides it wants to lose fat. You can just decide if you want to lose fat. But you don't get to decide where. Some girls are like, hey, I lost like 20 pounds, but I don't have a big ass anymore. I guess your body decided that you didn't need fat in your ass. So you don't have a fat ass anymore. Maybe you lose your boobs first. Maybe it's your gut first. Who really knows? But you don't get to decide where it's lost at. But you can be muscular and feminine. I don't really understand why Abby exists. I know that feels like a non sequitur, but Abby is the prime example of why. Because it doesn't make sense. First of all, The Last of Us world doesn't make any sense. But that's just me. I could get into that a whole nother time. But Abby, in that world that is presented, doesn't make sense. She is bigger than all of the dudes. And of course you can argue, maybe she just has superior genetics to everyone else. And that could be the case. However, genetics are one, although big, facet of being like super buff. If you have poor training, if you have poor diet, if you don't get enough rest, if you're too stressed, you will probably not be able to fully express your genetics. Maybe you have bad genetics. Like, let's be real, right? As far as we know, Bill Gates has the best genetics in the world. He is better than Arnie. But because he never trained, he never wanted to be like that, we would never know. You don't know what your genetics are unless you go out and you try to dig them out with training, with good diet, with proper rest, etc., etc. So Abby doesn't make a lot of sense, but people would defend Abby by saying, "You're a sexist. You just want all women to look sexy." And some people do want that. Some people just think every woman should look like Jessica Rabbit. I don't know why, but they do. Abby, on the other hand, looks like a dude and you stuck a female face on her. Even her body model looks more feminine. Why? Because Colleen Foch, because her body model is smaller. Abby, for some reason, they didn't think about when you make someone taller, they are not going to look as muscular. They're going to look less muscular because they have longer limbs. The muscle's going to be stretched out more. If you have someone shorter, they're going to look more muscular because the muscles aren't as long. They're kind of short, so they look bigger. Maybe it's because of insertions, right? Maybe the insertion's a little bit closer, so the muscle looks a little bit bigger. Who knows? But the thing about Abby is that she just doesn't make sense in her world. She is so muscular, and yet no one else is. No one else takes their training as seriously, or their diet, or anything like that. I mean, I guess there's enough food for her to be buff. Technically there would be, right? You have the whole ocean. Why aren't you sending boats to go fish in the ocean and bring that back? I have no clue. And if she's just taking a bunch of, like, PEDs, because some of them will last for a very long time without expiring, despite what some people may think. I got that from More Plates, More Dates. Check him out. He's really cool. He'll teach you all about steroids and other stuff. But essentially, Abby doesn't like. Okay, here's the reality, right? If there was a stash of steroids that lasted, let's say 60 years, the thing is, in that kind of setting, you would need to share those because you gotta defend your place in that setting. Obviously, like I said before, I don't think the world makes a lot of sense, and I will openly talk about it, maybe even on this podcast. I don't know, this is media and fitness. But essentially, yeah, she doesn't make a lot of sense. As far as Aloy goes, I think she's fine. Like, she's a little stubby, fit girl. I don't see the big deal. I have more issue with the justification. Like, oh yeah, her model, she looks like if she broke a nail, she would die. It's like, okay, there are a bunch of, like, very feminine women who could probably, like, kick all y'all's asses, outlift every single one of you. I don't think that's what really matters. In fact, I think if you said nothing, you would have been a lot better off. But yeah, I didn't really see any difference. They look the same. If you're going to be running around, if you're going to run from, I don't know where Aloy comes from, but if you're going to somehow end up in the west of the US, I would assume you're probably fit, like very fit. You might be a little fit if you like ran, but she seems like pretty strong. So again, I don't really see an issue with her. But yeah, like, women don't need to be buff. Oh, there we go. So yeah, women don't need to look like men to be muscular and buff. Look at my favorite Olympic lifter, Lydia Valentine. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but let's pretend I did. Look at her, right? She is muscular. She looks strong. She is strong, but she still looks feminine. Like, she does a little cute heart at the end of her lift. She's adorable. You don't need to be like, oh, I need to come up with a name. Hold on. Oh, I'm Rebecca, and I am strong. or some shit like that, right? You don't need to be like that. You can just be like, yeah, I like lifting heavy things, and my name is Susie. Get off my shit. At this point, it's just kind of going on a tangent. So, I'm going to end the episode there. I wanted to talk about how super soldier serums don't work great. I don't think it will fit in with this episode. Plus, I don't know how long this will end up being, but the recording is closing in on an hour, and I don't have a problem with talking for a very long period of time. Obviously, I'm still going, but I don't want to overwhelm anyone with the episodes. We're going to, and of course, I would just be ending up repeating my points, so I think we're good here. Anyway, if you enjoy the show, maybe check out the next episode. Drop some tips down. This is my fourth time recording this because two of them I had the mic a little too close to my face and you could hear all kinds of noises, and I didn't want to edit all of that. A couple times the file got messed up, so yeah, I could talk for a while. So if you like this kind of stuff, stay tuned for the next episode. Um, Obviously, I have old videos on my channel, but no. If you like this, maybe stick around for episode 2. It should be up soon-ish, maybe. I don't know. I just talk to myself a lot, so maybe these will be quite frequent, maybe they won't be, and obviously, as I do it more, I'll feel more comfortable doing it. So, have a good day. See you later.